The last time EA randomly dropped information about a brand new game, it was pretty much Apex Legends, and Battlefield is one of its largest franchises in the entire EA umbrella, so seeing them nonchalantly just throw out the first global information about the next Battlefield title, likely coming in 2025, was pretty wild to see. Well, not only do we have new concept art images, 3 in total when you include the new investor call from today, which I will show you in this video, I've also managed to suss out the first location that features in the brand new Battlefield game. Now, before we talk about the investor call, which detailed new information about what's happening with the Battlefield game, alongside a very detailed IGN article with Vince Zampella, who's heading up the new Battlefield title, here are the first 3 images of the game. We have 3 very different sceneries, one depicting a battle tank, one depicting a new type of helicopter, and another one depicting a scenic city-style backdrop. All 3 of these are brand new concept arts that will be part of the new Battlefield game releasing hopefully in 2025. And all 3 of them are likely going to be separate locations that will feature in one of the given experiences that Battlefield is hoping to offer. Battlefield is offering not only a multiplayer and a single player by the looks of things this time around, but also a third mode, which is alluding to either a battle royale or an extraction shooter. Given that Vince Zampella's experience includes releasing Apex Legends and Ripple Effect being the studio below him, I think it's very likely that you're going to see a Battlefield battle royale experience releasing with this game. We will get into the nitty-gritty details of what was in these articles and in the investor call, which I actually think has a lot more telling information about this new Battlefield game. But I've actually been able to identify the first location for Battlefield in 2025. The first concept art that Battlefield has revealed globally to the entire world for their new game 100% takes place in Gibraltar. And there are a number of different areas and assets that you can see throughout the map and the actual physical version of Gibraltar itself that clearly identify this being the location. There are a number of buildings within the concept art, although of course this is a heavily destroyed version of the area, and also some areas on the riverfront itself and waterfronts that show that this is in fact Gibraltar as the main location for the first bit of information we have for the next Battlefield game. The buildings themselves feel very much like Gibraltar for those of you who have ever been there, and the terrain itself is also very fitting. The mountain range in the distance, alongside some of the buildings that you're seeing that I've highlighted and identified, clearly show this to be a like-for-like match for Gibraltar, and very much an obvious choice for a new Battlefield title. Although we know nothing about what will likely happen in the next game, it's going to probably be a theoretical conflict, as touching on modern conflicts tends to be pretty controversial. Battlefield has used Gibraltar before. It featured in 2142 way back when Camp Gibraltar was a main map that featured between PAC and EU forces. And for a new Battlefield game in 2025 featuring what will likely be a theoretical conflict, Gibraltar makes perfect sense, as it's a landmass that's shared between Europe and Africa, which is really exciting in terms of geopolitical science and security, and makes a lot of sense for a staging point for a hotbed in a game like Battlefield. And if Battlefield is truly to be returning to its core roots, which include land, air, and sea, then a map like Gibraltar could make perfect sense. Now granted, this concept art is in fact just concept art, and we don't know whether Gibraltar is going to feature in single player, multiplayer, or the third mode, which is likely a battle royale, but what we can say for certain is that this is the location and it will feature in Battlefield in 2025 and beyond. The other 2 pieces of concept art depict what looks like a very open Battlefield tank-style mission. You can see a sort of standalone tank in an open space, and another one that seems very urban and very modern, and has a little bit of a Black Hawk Down feel to it. Obviously, granted, very different experience, very different format, but it does look really cool, and these are some very promising pieces of concept art. It's worth remembering, of course, that concept art is indeed just concept art. It does not depict anything about gameplay, it does not depict anything about the scope and scale of what they're hoping to achieve, but it does try to depict the general feel for those games. And concept art generally in the past tries to set the tone for what's to be expected in the game, whether that's certain types of grittiness, certain types of aesthetics, it kind of leans into that. One of the underlying themes that we're seeing throughout all of these pieces of concept art is this weird sort of targeting style system and also an orange streak. And whilst to most people this might just look like general marketing shenanigans for Battlefield, it's actually safe to say that these are quite important features of the next game. And I would actually say that this orange streak and targeting system that's being used as an overlay for a lot of this concept art is likely a representation of the fact that Battlefield is hosting a number of different experiences in a number of different locations in their upcoming title, and that it's going to be a sort of globalized conflict to some extent. We're seeing what looks like a very obvious Gibraltar setting, what looks like a very obvious desert setting in one of the concept arts, and what looks like an entirely different setting from the other two in a third one, which may illustrate that we're seeing very different locations with very different purposes across different experiences under a Battlefield title. Vince Zampella has an article out with IGN that we will be touching on, but it's kind of information that some people have already heard by this point. I actually feel the investor call gave you a better insight into what's happening with the next Battlefield, and I'm going to give you a quick summary here. The investor call stated that Battlefield is going back to its core tenets, and it identifies these as all-out warfare, epic scale, massive destruction, and high-intensity action. It stated that the most significant success in all of those Battlefield past titles leans into those core tenets, but some of those games have in fact missed the mark, and 2042 was used as an example that didn't quite meet these core tenets and expectations. The idea is to shift their approach into the next iteration of Battlefield, and that gameplay has been tested with a private community for the past year, with 4 different development studios working on this project, taking more time for this development cycle than any Battlefield game to date. Those of you may remember that a number of studios ended up helping out in the development of 2042, but they weren't involved from the beginning. This is very different this time around in the sense that all of these development studios have been given their own branch of the game to work on, and have been given full creative control by the looks of things as to what happens in those elements. Battlefield is very much aware that in order to provide a long-term live service and different experiences, it is going to be a multi-studio approach. And I think it's safe to say that EA is very much banking on this to be a success, and is going to be using all of these studios as much as they humanly can to make this happen. DICE is leading the charge on multiplayer, Criterion is driving content experiences across both single-player and multiplayer, and are now a fully integrated Battlefield studio. Motive is bringing their rich storytelling and action to the Battlefield mix in a story-like setting, and Ripple Effect is working on a brand new Battlefield experience fueled by the unique DNA that Battlefield has that has allegedly been testing well with players. Battlefield Central Technology is enabling the team to work with tools and technology across all of these studios, and Battlefield Central Tech is effectively a multi-studio support mechanism that allows them to use the Frostbite engine in a number of different ways, bringing it under one umbrella. Internally, the developers have been playing the game nearly daily for well over a year and are prioritizing their Keep Green initiative, which is focused on software stability. Allegedly, they're going to be testing more widely with more players in 2025, introducing a large-scale community-driven testing program in early 2025 with feedback on gameplay, performance, and fun factors. And it's said that both Vince and EA are all in on Battlefield. This is in conjunction with a previous article that was released yesterday with Vince Zampella talking about the future of the next Battlefield game, saying that he was nodding towards Battlefield 3 and giving Battlefield 4 recognition for what they did for the franchise. And the article that was released with IGN very much read to me as an article that was less about showcasing the flashiness of the next Battlefield game, and more about explaining what it is that they're hoping to achieve. I think DICE and all of EA really are very much aware of the fact that 2042 had the perfect marketing campaign, the best trailers, and arguably the most successful pre-launch of any first-person shooter. But the unfortunate reality is that the gameplay didn't back up that campaign, and if Battlefield wants to be successful going into 2025, it's about executing and showing the proof in the pudding. It's about showing people that the Battlefield that they know and love is in fact back coming into this next iteration. The article is in the description of this video, but to nail out a few things that was mentioned, Battlefield 2025 aims to go back to basics, is removing the specialist system that we saw, it will be vaguely inspired by Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, and will no longer be focusing on a 128 player count, rather focusing on experiences that make sense across any player count. The idea simply being that fun should be the focus, rather than an arbitrary statistic or player count number. They also had a bit more of an emphasis on better designed, denser spaces for Battlefield, and I really appreciated this paragraph as a long-term Battlefield fan, just because the issue I found with 2042 and even some other Battlefield games of the past is that they misunderstand the flow. They don't understand that Battlefield is about the flow of gameplay, and it's something that has been missed quite often in the past. Even though Battlefield games are these wide, sprawling spaces, the genius of playing in a Battlefield game as a first-person shooter and as an individual player is the fact that you can utilize and control the chaos around you with well-designed spaces that allow you to utilize movement, mobility, and gameplay abilities to the best of your ability. The article also explicitly stated that they're aiming to bring back core fans with a community program launching in 2025 to re-engage them for the first time. And the entire article to me, again, just felt like very much a piece that they wanted to talk about the next Battlefield game rather than flash the next Battlefield game in our faces. And I think that's the right approach going into the next title, and I think this is very much them being somewhat self-aware of the position they're in with their core community. There is a long way to go for the next Battlefield game. We are talking about a title that's going to be offering single-player, multiplayer, and potentially a third mode experience, which to me is definitely going to be a battle royale. For Battlefield, it's kind of a no-brainer. You have a studio that has produced great titles in the past under Ripple Effect, a studio that produced Battlefield Portal, which was a very flexible version of Battlefield that we've seen before, and of course Vince Zampella, who basically headed up most of what Apex Legends currently is today. It also feels quite fitting that finding the first location that's going to be featuring in the next Battlefield game as Gibraltar is a location that's featured in the Battlefield franchise past in Battlefield 2142. For those of you who didn't play that game, Camp Gibraltar was a pretty decent map. I'm curious to hear you guys' thoughts and feelings on the next Battlefield game. For me personally, one of the big things for me is that Battlefield does get a lot fundamentally correct. Visually, it's usually a stunning game. Audibly, they usually do a fantastic job. In terms of hit reg and networking, they tend to do really well, especially now that they won't be plagued by focusing on a 128-player environment. And optimization's been pretty good for Battlefield 2042, despite the fact that the game had a very large player count and a lot to account for. For me, Battlefield is a franchise that gets the fundamentals right very often, and if it can build on that by providing a true Battlefield experience like Battlefield 3, like Battlefield 4, but with some of the warlike grittiness that fans came to appreciate in Battlefield 1, then you're off to a home run. You know, we're talking about a franchise that has the potential to really sell serious numbers, and also the last real casual shooter in the market. Battlefield has things like server browsers. Battlefield has things like community playlists. Battlefield is the last first-person shooter that doesn't entirely hedge its bets on skill-based matchmaking for people to have fun and enjoy themselves. We're talking about the last bastion of just being able to sit down with some friends, play a little messy game of some Battlefield, and have a good time, without sweating, without focusing on metas, just enjoying yourself. And the initial response I've seen online to this concept art very much tells me that people are looking for an experience like that. They're not looking for Call of Duty experiences, they're not looking for the sweaty experiences that they're receiving in games like Warzone. They're looking for a Battlefield experience that just does what Battlefield has always done well. And it really is in the court now of EA, DICE, Ripple Effect, and all the collaborative studios to make that happen. I'm really interested to see your thoughts and feelings in the comment section down below. As always, folks, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one.